Let's discuss everyone's favorite and most exciting topic, bailouts and stimulus packages. So these two kind of go hand in hand with everything that's been going on recently, and I know this is going to be a strongly opinionated one, so I would love to hear what you have to say when you cuss me out in the comments. Bailouts happen when the government provides money and resources to a failing company/industry in the hopes of rejuvenating them to be able to meet its financial obligations. Now, I think most people think that this is literally handing over free money, which can happen in the form of grants, but what also happens is loans are given with very low interest rates, and sometimes the government can even get equity of the company. Now, the reason why you clicked on this video is because Royal Caribbean, Carnival Cruise Line, and Norwegian Cruise Line, who all dominate the global cruise market, will likely not get any money from the $2 trillion stimulus package that Congress recently passed. The reasoning behind this is pretty simple. None of them are registered here in the United States as a business, nor are the majority of their employees even American. Now, these three companies really have to scramble on ways to cut down on expenses because I don't think the C-19 is going away anytime soon, which means no one is going to risk going on a cruise either. So this is going to include drawing on their credit lines, less marketing, less capital expenditures, and of course, they already won't need to be spending as much on food or fuel because they won't be operating cruise ships as much. But most importantly, I think that almighty dividend, which is close to a 14% yield, that's going to get suspended until further notice. A company can only pay out dividends when they're making money. When customers are asking for refunds or possibly even suing you because they got ill during a trip, that's less money that can go toward paying dividends when you're fighting litigation cases. Now, I feel for all those investors who invested heavily into this hot stock just a few months ago. A very popular YouTuber talked it up so much, and unfortunately, many people just blindly follow them. And that's why I always say none of this is never financial advice and strictly for educational purposes only. Always do your own research. Don't just buy a stock because someone online says so. Also, a good rule that I follow is I tend to avoid hot stocks, which are stocks that everyone is constantly talking about. And I never let any one position become more than 10% of my portfolio. Not all hope is lost though. Sure, these companies will be hard hit for the coming months, but that doesn't mean this industry is a sinking ship. Oh, okay, maybe that's a bad example, but when we return to a normal life, people are still going to be wanting to go on cruises. There's always going to be a demand for this type of service. Cruise ships aren't exactly cheap, and they don't appear out of nowhere overnight. And even if the US didn't bail them out in their last bill, who's to say that won't happen down the road? Or maybe another country or company will at a price. So no, I don't think that all hope is lost for them. Just like my hope isn't lost in you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. But bailouts don't happen for every company or industry. Only those deemed essential to the economy because of their value or potential loss of jobs if not bailed out. And here's where the first controversy arises. Like, who is to say what is deemed essential enough? Seems like airlines are making the cut. I mean, after all, people will always need to travel both domestically and internationally. But what about the hotel industry? Restaurants? Surely they're losing out on profits during this tough time as well. We even have the cruise line companies wanting bailouts, as previously mentioned, even though many of them are not even headquartered here in the US to intentionally avoid paying taxes. Heck, maybe we should even bail out companies like Altria, because people are always going to need cigarettes, and teenagers are going to be wanting to hit that jewel pen, right? Bailouts have been going on for centuries. After the Revolutionary War, when the government bailed out the original 13 colonies who became broke by financing the war. The government assisted many financial companies during the late 80s, and of course everyone remembers the bailout of 2008. Of course, there's those companies who did fail and the government didn't bail them out, and they have become just a footnote in history now. Will we see that this time around? Maybe with Carnival Cruise Line? Not unless a popular YouTuber and his followers will bail them out, of course. While most of the companies did indeed pay back their loans with interest to the government, bailouts will always remain a touchy subject. What about all the sketchy behavior these companies exercised leading up to the recession, though? Banks basically made themselves insolvent with their own greed and bad misjudgment, with their billions of dollars worth of mortgage-related loans that should have never been made out in the first place. Many employees became rich with commissions. No one paid that back or was held accountable. Fast forward to this past decade, when 6 airline companies spent 96% of their free cash flow buying back their own company shares. 96%, you cannot make this up. Now, share buybacks are super controversial, but companies will often do this if they think their shares are trading under market value and thereby decreasing the number of shares outstanding, so each share is now worth more. And who owns the most shares of a company? That would be none other than the people who run the company, who are now all of a sudden a lot richer thanks to the artificial boost. Boeing, which is a company that I personally own, spent $44 billion, or 74% of its free cash flow, on stock repurchases in the past 10 years. Now, when times get rough, what does Boeing and the other airline companies do? Ask us taxpayers for money, of course. Boeing over here is asking for a minimum of $60 billion for aerospace manufacturing. What are we, ATMs to these people? Boeing's former CEO is long gone. He got fired at the end of 2019. Once more information came out that Boeing knew of the potential risk of its new aircrafts and ignored them, while leading to the deaths of 346 people. But hey, Dennis is probably laughing all the way to the bank. Where's the accountability on these companies for being so foolish with their money? Us regular people, there's nobody here to bail us out. We have to be financially smart because there's no government bailout coming our way. I've always been against wiping out student loan debt because as someone who paid all of his in just 2 years, I think everyone can do it. It's just about being smart and disciplined. But where's the smart and being disciplined approach by big corporations? Bailouts can be profitable to the government as well. As previously mentioned, most of the time this is not free money. During the last recession, the US government bought preferred stock in 8 of the largest banks, who were forced to give them a 5% dividend, which increased to 9% in 5 years if the stocks were not bought back. By the time TARP, or the Troubled Asset Relief Program, ended, the government concluded its investments had earned more than $13 billion. Those are some pretty solid returns. Nobody ever seems to remember that part of the bailouts though, but everyone remembers the part where executives got big cash bonuses. It also reestablishes the notion that companies can act irresponsible and the government will always play big brother in dire times. Looks like a dozen years later, that precedent is still followed. So here are just a few solutions I have that I think would make this a whole lot more fair and hold companies a bit more accountable in the future. The first is to have a limit on stock buyback. Perhaps companies can only invest $1 billion or whatever arbitrary number can be determined here on buybacks every rolling 6 months. This way, companies aren't wasting all their free cash flow on artificially boosting their stock price and actually working on improving the company and having cash reserves. Also, if you do qualify for a government bailout, you shouldn't be allowed to buy back shares for X amount of years, or maybe to even qualify for a bailout, X% of your cash flow in the last 5 years, on average, can't be spent on buybacks. This would create an incentive for companies to have some sort of buffer and have actual qualifications for a bailout. The next one is CEO and executive pay. Now, I'm not one to bash CEOs for getting paid 50 times more than their average employee. A CEO is likely 50 times more important than the average employee. Depending on the job, most people can train to become an average employee, but only select people in this world can be a CEO and all the responsibilities that come with it. Plus, they've worked very hard their whole life, had many late hours to get into this position. Now, I know most CEOs make the bulk of their money through stock options. Perhaps there should be a cap on how much CEOs can earn if they ask for a bailout. and the rest of that money goes back into the business. Maybe board members shouldn't be entitled to any sort of dividends, and they certainly should not be getting any sort of raise if they ask for a bailout. But what do you think we can do to incentivize more companies or industries from asking for a bailout come the next recession after 2020? Do you think they should even get one? I was a bit surprised by the last poll I did and the results. I figured it would be 75-25, but I thought the results would actually be going in the other direction. As always, let me know in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button for more videos.